Hello, this is Cryptolyze. I hope you are well. On this Tuesday, 28 November 2023, we meet again today for the daily. We're going to talk crypto, we're going to talk BTC, we're also going to talk macro figures because we have big news that should arrive this week. We're going to have to talk about all this and we'll start right away. As a reminder, you always have the possibility of having free access to the educational course, which is a 60-hour training worth €400, which allows you to learn blockchain, crypto, investment, analysis technique, trading, everything to become profitable. Through 130 videos, 400 pages of guides, quizzes, to find out where you are in your progress and all for free. To have access to this lifelong training, simply use the platform of one of our partners. Everything is explained in the comments and descriptions. We're going to talk about Binance again, but this time we're not going to talk about CZ. We're not going to talk about the impact of what happened on Binance. We're mainly going to talk about Richard Tang, who is the new CEO of Binance, and the approach he has to the future of Binance. Clearly, he was quite frank in his speech. He explained that he had a plan, that he was going to communicate about it, we would soon hear about it, and that his two axes were, at a given moment, working with the governments to ensure mass adoption. He still remains in the idea of moving towards mass adoption of the Web3. And that is exactly what he wants, and he intends to work enormously with governments at the same time. He has not much choice with the American government to be able to achieve this goal. And it's interesting to see the approach he has, which is still relatively identical to that of CZ, but just more washed out. In any case, the problem is that it hasn't yet convinced us. I think that, in fact, we will have to really wait for communications afterwards. It will be complicated to take back the reins after CZ. CZ, who was very present on the networks. Who himself, in fact, was a form of door general word on all cryptos, in which he had the good word. He sought to promote all cryptos. The adoption of Web3, he had always defined that he was not looking and GT. To gain existing market shares, but to conquer those that it was not yet. And precisely the fact of pushing the adoption of the Web3 word, which comes up once again in the speech of the new CEO. But is it that he will be able to have as much impact, as much force? I think we will have the answer very quickly. A little article which is quite nice, in which we will later confirm it with a little graph. Will gold above 2,000 signal the end of Bitcoin's rise? Basically, the idea that is defined behind it is that the fact that gold passes the 2,000 is a signal that at a given moment gold remains and will always remain the standard, and that inevitably Bitcoin behind it will not be able to follow, and that there will be a decline in the correlation between the two. And the article returns, and in particular Shift returns to the fact that maximalist Bitcoins used the failure of gold to pass the 2,000 to promote Bitcoin. And I think it's interesting to analyze not one versus the other, but rather one in relation to the other. All right? We are going to build a Bitcoin to gold ratio, and you will see that it will be very nice. It will be in the technical part. So, in terms of news, there are also other little things that are relatively nice. It's going to be the economic calendar, in which we still have quite a few little things happening this week. So, as usual, I haven't put the filters there, but we're going to quickly put the filters on the United States and Europe, although it will be especially this week the United States, which will be important. And GTI, in which we have here the Confidence Conference Board, which will be relatively important. I think that on the other hand, the markets will react relatively little to it because we will be more or less in the forecast we will see, especially on Wednesday, the GDP T3, which falls with a forecast at 4.9 versus 2.1. Historically, therefore, on what happened in the previous quarter. So there we really have a very strong impact on the strength of the U.S. market. And on that, the share of the NASDAQ and therefore of the tech parties is really in GT. Very important, and above all, the share of equity, and therefore of the performance of stocks compared to the overall U.S. performance is really overweighted. We will certainly discuss this in a video. From the weekly Saturday, in which I'm trying to find a little information for you, you will see that it is relatively impressive. We will discuss it together this weekend. However, for me, it's really the appointment with Wednesday 29, and then we'll look for Powell's speech on Friday. Although on Thursday we have some information like the CPI on Europe. I think that it will absolutely not change. and then we will have the PCE core, which will fall, but which will have to be approximately equivalent, and GT. As expected, quite a few movements overall. We don't forget that we are at the end of the year. The end of the year means that we are arriving at December. December. We are taking the profits precisely for Christmas, but also to simply close the performances of the year and pocket the bonuses. This is often the case, and therefore, obviously, we always pay close attention to positions which can be aggressive, precisely on sale. Moreover, on the Nasdaq, we have a temporalization, a big temporalization on this important level in which we have a consolidation above 4,500, which is rather positive for an upward continuity, but it is relatively weak. We are not going to hide that there at the moment, if we ever have another day today and a day tomorrow, which makes us go back below, there it will be ultra bearish, especially if the weekly candle consolidate below. So here on the other hand, if we close below, that is to say that we will have a month of December which risks being relatively red, and in which we risk going to retest levels a little bit lower. To have a breather on the blooded species which risks being more aggressive. Level of the American dollar, very important. We have successfully reintegrated here into the range in which we have been for some time, and we see that we are slowly moving towards the 101. Changed, we still have the same momentum here which is being built. In terms of oil, interesting to see too, we are in a range reintegration, in fact which has been present for relatively long time, since October 2021. So important level here in relation to the SPF 500 and in relation to the macroeconomic crisis that we have experienced. So here we have the establishment of this range with the consolidation before having the last acceleration, before having a breath, and we see that we are in the process of totally reintegrating with the month that we are in. We see that we are roughly in the middle of the range, and it is very likely to go for a 66 retest at the bottom of the range in GT. And top of the 83 range. I think if we stay at 66, it really won't be long. Once again, the OPEC countries will not let this happen, and we will go back to around 70-80. The figures that will be important to watch, particularly in terms of the U.S. GDP announcement, will be here. The differential between the 10-year and 2-year bounds agree, very important. Level, which is negative, which implies that we have a pricing instability in the 2 years, which is more important. And GT, that the possibility of having instability in the 10 years is exactly the representation of the two that we can have. And we see that there we have swallowed the big candle that we had already started to make the month precedent, and we will see the reaction we will have on the very important GDP if we have an upward recovery. It is rather positive. If, on the other hand, we are going to retest low, very low levels, which are here the 0.64, that means that we are not out yet, and that risks giving us a lot of and got time before turning positive again, and certainly political instability will play a role with, as a date to keep in mind, the American presidential elections. So, BTC versus gold, very interesting as an analysis. We come back to the article that we read earlier. Yes, it's true that we are in a relatively important area in which we have had this last acceleration phase. We are in the process of retesting two very important resistance zones, which have been historically supportive. And above all, we are in the process of filling part of imbalance at the level of this candle, which also potentially corresponds to a retest of the order block, which is located here. We are still relatively far away, but I think we can still make a small acceleration, implying a small outperformance of BTC compared to gold, before certainly having a much more aggressive form of retracement. There again, the retracement may be due to two things. One, an underperformance of BTC compared to gold, implying BTC falls and gold does not, or even the opposite. And on the other hand, we could have gold, which is rising and therefore accelerating, versus BTC, which is accelerating less quickly, or even stagnating, or even falling. And in fact, it is the two which will lead to a retracement, and we see retracement levels which are still relatively important, which would be a ratio of 15, in which we have a large part of imbalance, so it would be quite coherent, in fact, to have an outperformance of gold compared to BTC in the coming weeks and GT. And in any case, I think we will note this graph, and we will certainly go back to it Q1 2024 to look at what it is, because it is interesting. At the level of BTC, we have a week which is relatively in the red, which is being confirmed. Well, the week is far from over, but especially when we look at the daily, we see that we are in a range and no more than that, okay? There is no trend, strictly speaking. We are just in a form of lateralization/consolidation. Compared to all the bullish acceleration that we always had this bullish creek, followed by a lateralization and GT, which is classic. On the other hand, what do we see? We see here a bearish divergence which is well in the process of being established with the lateralization, and behind a momentum which is in the process of collapsing, and it is not for nothing that for several days we have felt a weakness in the course level. We have already felt it in this bearish impact in which I explained to you that if we broke this level yesterday we were going to blow up the induction here, or even retest here. We see that we went. And giant search pixel, precisely for the retest and the 0.5 to have a bullish reaction which is rather classic. When we zoom in, we see clearly that we went exactly to look for the imbalance which is here. So we have clearly fulfilled all this part of drastic fall, so we are really in a classic bearish retest also, which will be confirmed once again. With a breakout here of 36,722, and at that moment for me, my target will be around 36,200. It's a very good target, and I think it is confirmed quite quickly by Fibonacci. If we take the extension of this bearish impulse on the retracement, we are on an objective 1 and 1-1, yes, that's it. 36,300, 36,200. So for me there, we will potentially have a nice reaction to see if we make a very good accumulation to leave. Either we will look for the lowest, and there on the other hand it will be a very big signal, okay? Remember that for the moment, we are in something that is rather consistent in terms of retracement, as long as we are not going to break this low, okay? If we break this low, that implies that we have a very big bearish sign which is being put in place, and therefore that implies that we are blowing up the following lows, and therefore potentially behind all the liquidity which has been accumulated throughout and got this bullish creek, and therefore there is the theory of the retest of 33,200 or even 32,000 with a bearish acceleration. Besides, at the order flow level, are there things that are being put in place? We still have this big divergence between the price and the open interest, whether on Binance or whether it is the cumulative one on all the exchanges. So this implies that we have a reduction in the levers, which are in the process of being used whether downwards or upwards, I remind you, in GT. That here it is an accumulation of open interest, implying an accumulation of the levers used, and we always see a continuity of the drop in the positions of the top traders. So always here a continuity either of profit-taking or rather an increased shorts to accelerate the decline. In any case, what is certain is that at the end of the year there are profits taken, and this can only happen in the month of December, and we are getting closer to the month of December. In terms of the liquidation map, interesting to see that we are building long lines, we are absorbing them, we are building long lines, we are absorbing them, and that is exactly what we experienced in the acceleration. Bullish, moreover, throughout the bullish acceleration. It is this type of construction that we saw, but precisely inverted. Therefore, with shorts which were systematically swallowed, and we can clearly see that the positions are being repurchased in relation to the positions. Shorts, okay? So that means that we have here the levers which are mainly positioned on the long side and which is positive for the long squeeze and a bearish continuity. And we can clearly see here once again on Kingfisher that we have a block of liquidity which is on hold and which is going exactly in fact to look for the entire segment that we have there and therefore potentially here the zone that we have. We have a concordance between the liquidity, the analysis, and the Fibonacci ratios, so we can indeed have a breakout in this zone and see an accumulation, see the reaction of the price at that time. At the CVD level still, we are still starting to sink in, which is rather logical, therefore a market which is losing momentum, therefore a market which is much less aggressive. And in any case, the end of the year is always a loss of aggressiveness at the market level. I will end on total 3 to tell you that, all in all, I think we are doing not too badly on altcoins. We are not sinking too much despite the bearish breakouts that we have at the level in GT. Odd of BTC currently, I thought that we were potentially going to look for the bottom quite quickly of this candle. This is not the case, so we are able to hold on thanks to the performance of certain altcoins, and clearly this allows us to maintain the levels on total 3. We're done for today. I hope you like this video. If so, don't forget to leave me a like and a comment. It supports the work I do, and it helps me, always a pleasure. And GT. We meet at 13:30 to talk about flow.